Sri Sri Gaurada Madhava ki Jai. Sri Caitanya Charitamrita ki Jai. Sri Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki Jai. Saksida Deva Swami Maharaj ki Jai. Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada ki Jai. Guru Parivar ki Jai. Gaur Premanande. Continuing our discussion of the 7th chapter of the Adi-lila of Chaitanya Charitamrita. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was meeting in Benares with the sannyasis, where Mayavad persuasion is the central topic of the chapter, the topic that chapter leads up to, having segued away from, as the chapter does, the explanation of the Mangala charm, the last verse of which was the consisted of the glorification of the Panchatattva, so we heard about that. And tonight we're at the point in the narrative where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has spoken to Prakashananda Saraswati and the other Vedantins, and he spoke at some length about the efficacy of Nam Sankirtan, which is his main method, and he supported this. Also, he did it in a very nice way, as Dula Chandra was admiring at the end of our previous discussion, the way in which Mahaprabhu opened the discussion in order to make ingress into their minds and hearts with his ideas was not confrontational, but in a way that was very humble. I mean, he cited, I don't know anything, but these are the words of my guru, which is a very powerful statement in itself. His Guru Nishta, his adherence to his guru's order, and so forth. Of course, everything is said to flow from that, spiritually speaking. And so this is reminiscent of the way Prabhupada would speak. I take no credit, I only simply follow the order of my Guru Maharaj. So he presented his explanation of his activities, which were brought into question, his activities of singing and dancing and musical accompaniment with what appears to be religious fanatics, which maybe are for some people prefer a sannyasi whose dharma, Prakashananda said, is to study the Vedanta, be sober, and so forth. It seems very much out of character. And so, again, Mahaprabhu answered by way of saying, well, I don't know much, and my guru told me that, for that matter. In fact, he told me that study of Vedanta was not within my adhikar. I didn't have eligibility for that. Instead, he told me to chant the Krishna mantra. And as I say, in the course of humbly making his presentation, he shows that he's not unaware of the scriptural conclusions, which the study of Vedanta, one would think that by which one should arrive at those spiritual conclusions. He's bringing out points that to us, of course, seem very obvious, emphasized as they are by the Goswamis. But that's why we have the Goswamis. We sometimes describe their literary contributions as the Bhakti Shastras. Srinivas described the Nana Shastra Vicharana Kripano Sadharma Samstapako Lokanam Hitakaranam Tuyonemanusharanako. Out of compassion for the people of the world, they took from all the revealed scriptures and presented really the central theme of bhakti. As we've been discussing over bhakti, the power of love. I mean, in love you have knowledge and ignorance, both have their place. It's not one side of the pendulum or the other. It's really the middle path, to use a Buddhist term. Path of love harmonizes. Again, there's ignorance in love, and there's knowledge in love at the same time. For example, there's ignorance in Krishna praying that Krishna is God. And there's certainly a kind of knowing there, obviously, as their whole lives are centered on the perfect object of love. So, the Goswamis, very much, I like to think of it, what Vyasa was instructed by Narada to do in the form of Srimad Bhagavatam. And they took it to another level, emphasizing bhakti, on certain terms, in such a way, with such an emphasis, that it is almost as if the paths of Gyan, Karma, and Yoga are deprecated. Carefully look, they're not, we're warned not to deprecate them. They have their place. We deprecate them only in terms of their being seen as efficacious unto themselves, or when they are presented in such a way as to be dismissive of bhakti. They are like the knowledge, even material acquisition. In one sense, these are sometimes thought as bridesmaids to the queen of bhakti. So again, we hear from the Bhagavad itself that this is how Narada advised Vyasa after he compiled all the sacred texts. This was his attempt in the Bhagavatam. And we find the Goswamis coming and making the Bhagavatam their central text, from which all of their books are drawn in one sense, although they draw from everywhere. They're drawing out, in the context of doing that, what the Bhagavatam is saying, and underscoring it more so than Vyasa was able to do. The Bhagavatam lends itself maybe to some slightly different interpretations, not very well to an Advaitin interpretation, but with their commentaries on the Bhagavatam, make that clear. And then again, they're drawing from everywhere. Their knowledge of the sacred text was astounding, comprehensive, and in one sense, the essence of that is being presented by Mahaprabhu with his emphasis on his guru's orders to him to chant the holy name, and this was the way, and for Kali Yuga. And so it's apparent that he knows something about Vedanta. He knows that Krishna mantra is the essence of all Vedic mantras, and so on, as he said. And so he's presented the overt glorification of the very method that they thought was questionable, in a humble and indirect way, by saying, I'm just doing what my guru ordered, and by following it, this is what happened to me. And as they examine him closely, they understand that what happened to him is quite extraordinary. They're moved by him in the first place to entertain his explanation, and as we'll see as we go on, furthermore, he's been very successful in not only creating a teachable moment, but really in converting them by his charm, by his beauty, his personal beauty, by his tejas, prabha, his sense of being, his effulgence, and by the charming and humble way in which he makes his presentation, as if to say, one who really knows Vedanta knows that he doesn't know very much. In other words, they who say they know Brahman don't know Brahman. Those who say they don't know Brahman, they know Brahman. Something like this. Kind of a uncertainty within certainty, which I also often say love is like that. An uncertainty, a healthy uncertainty within the certainty. What's next? How will it play out? Vaishnavism, as I said before, as we understand, is being and becoming. It's not like some people think, forget the becoming, you have to just be. So stop trying to become, in other words, what you already are, be what you are. For us, it's we stop that kind of becoming, trying to be this, that, or the other thing, but we don't just be what we are. There's another transcendental becoming in relation to bhakti, and it has no end. So love has some excitement to it. It's dynamic rather than static. It's static, but there's a dynamism within it. So static in relation to movements of this world. So it's apparent, the point is, that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu does know something about Vedanta, and he's derived it from following his guru, from chanting the holy name, and we'll see he actually knows quite a bit more. So devotees aren't foolish sentimentalists, as Prabhupada Saraswati thought at first. So from explaining his method, which he was asked about, now he'll be asked something about Vedanta, even though he said, I'm not qualified to understand. They can see he knows. So now he'll give us an explanation of Vedanta. It gets a little more dry. It's been fairly juicy thus far, the interaction between Sanatan and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Tapan Leisure and Chandrasekhar, his devotees and so forth, and even between Prakashananda himself to some extent. But now we have to go into the what's wrong with Mayavad. And Krishnadas Kaviraj Swami is not a fan of Shankar's Advaita Vedanta. Not at all. And as I said before, one of the reasons this section is here is because, as an afterthought to the previous 6+ chapters of Gaudiya theology and philosophy, he wants to, before entering into the narrative, say something about, having said what it is, say something about what it's not. What has had prominence at his time and has prominence at this time also. Rather, I want to say it's rather simplistic, but a little complicated philosophically. It's kind of a swinging from one end of the pendulum to the other. The world is a problem. There is no world, for example. We'll go into it as we go go forward with the narrative. But it's Krishnadas kind of railing against Mayavad and some obviously important distinctions for a better part now of the this discussion. So, what? Prabhu Mishtabhakya Shuni Sannyasi Ragam. So the Sannyasi Ragam group of sannyasis, they heard Prabhu's Mishtabhakya, means these sweet words. We heard the sweet words. Again, as Duval mentioned that point, and it's true. It's obviously very spoken in a very sweet and charming way, and not in commanding or in a very dictatorial, very humble and charming. So, having heard his charming words, their consciousness was moved, their minds were moved. They were moved by his presence, and now they've heard words from his lotus mouth, and they're moved by that, they're humbled by that. Certain things, I just follow my guru. Is there something wrong with that? Something like that. And this is what happened to me. And they're seeing, well, a little more close up now, that this chanting and dancing, they saw at a distance. They're seeing it close up. They're seeing he's not an ascetic, but an ecstatic. He is very much what he is, the bliss that they're very much after, in a sense. So Kohimadu Bachan. So they then sweetly replied, and ye kichu kahile tumi sab satya hai Krishna prem se bhai jar bhagyodai. So they say, you ye kichu kahile tumi, all that you spoke sab satya hai. That's all true. What did he say? If I follow my guru, that's very good. I take Krishna Nam, Krishna mantra. We don't have to object to that. That's fine. I fell in love with Krishna. I became a devotee of Krishna. They don't have any objection. All of you said we don't disagree with that. Okay, that's good. Krishna prem se bhai jar bhagyodai. One who is bhagyadai, one who receives lucky, who's lucky, bhagya, he develops love for Krishna. One who develops love for Krishna, that person is his bhagya udai, his fortune, his luck is awakened. It's like he won the lottery or something like that. To have love of Krishna. So it's a nice word here, bhagya. It's a word that's used later on when Mahaprabhu was speaking, perhaps to Sanatana, when he says, Brahmanda Brahmite Kon Bhagyavan Jeev Guru Krishna Prasadi Bhai Bhakti Nata Bij. The jiva becomes bhagya, lucky. Sometimes the word yadrichaya is used in the Bhagavatam, similar idea, good fortune, luck. So he's saying more than he realizes it perhaps here. As I say, there's two forces in the world. There's the force of karma driving the world, and then there's the force of bhakti also in the world. That's the force. I never saw that movie. The force, the good force in the world. It can change the course of our life. Mahatmanas tamam daivim prakritimashita. Mahatmas, who in the 9th chapter of the Gita are mentioned. It's a description, if we study the chapter carefully, of devotees. Because he said there are others, they do this and that. Mahatmanas tamam prakritimashita. No, it's Katayam Taschama. Katayam Taschama. That's actually Satatam Kirtayantam, that's the verse. Because they're always chanting about me, Tam Kirtayantam, Tantas Chadidavata, Mashantaschamam. So Mahatmas are devotees, is the point. Krishna uses the word in the Gita. And they're working under a different influence. Daivim Prakritim. So they're not working under the material nature of Prakriti, but divine Prakriti, divine Maya. Not a Mahamaya, but a Yoga Maya. And as a result, their movement is not under the influence of karma's cause and effect. You do this, you get that. You do this, you get that. It's very like a machine, so to speak. God removes himself from that. That's the working material nature. You play with it, you get burned. That's how it works. And I honor it. I don't interfere with that, but my devotees do. That's their nature. They love me, so they move in the world, and they intervene on karma's influence and bring the influence of bhakti into the devotee's life. And that is called the luck of the jiva, the good fortune of the jiva. It's bhakti. If we say luck, means there's no, when we say it's lucky, there's no cause. I just got lucky. I guess it's, what does luck mean in English? Because there's no reason for it. Right? Just luck. In more theistic context, you might just, the grace of God. I won the lottery, whatever it is. Just got lucky, I guess. I got a blessing. So it's a nice word. Causeless. Sometimes it's not caused, as the other results in this world are being reactions to something we've done. We've sown, and so, as the Bible says, we reap accordingly. So that luck is then also, again, the movement of the devotees in the world who are not moving under cause and effect. They're not karma driven, but they're bhakti driven. And so, and this, of course, bhakti, sadhu sangha, which is then the janma of bhakti, mul janma of bhakti, the root, the birth of bhakti, is itself bhakti, sadhu sangha. So Vishwanath Thakur's reasons that, well, bhakti is independent, so bhakti causes bhakti, nothing else causes bhakti, only bhakti causes bhakti. And, well, we can trace it out and say that bhakti comes from sadhu sangha, then sadhu sangha is part of bhakti. So sadhu sangha is the root from which bhakti takes birth, and as Chaitanya Charitamrita teaches, in the form of sadhana, obviously. And when, by that sadhana, one attains bhava and prema, sadhu sangha is also essential. It means a mukhya anga. It means the principal thing to do in praying. It's a simple point, but it seems to be missed by many who think they don't need association. They've had association. It's done. Bhakti, I don't know, it's not, it means that kind of association, that type of interaction with advanced devotees. And we find many advanced devotees, like Narottam Crime, sing a song on the days that we commemorate the departure of great devotees. Yea, Adi-lila Premodan, and he's weeping, where is Sanatan gone? Krishna's Kaviraj, Swarup, Raghunath. How will I go on? Swarup has left. And he's a Prem Bhakta. His song is a nice example of the point of Chaitanya Charitamrita, which in the verse that I'm citing, we were discussing this earlier today, that Bhakti is born from sadhusanga, so it's not inherent. And when you, from it, prema, from its culture, it matures, that same sadhana bhakti matures into prema bhakti. It's not that sadhusanga is no longer necessary. I mean, the whole of the Goloka's sadhusanga, it's a societal affair, very social in that sense, its nature. So, so Prabhupada says something here. He says one who's very lucky, he gets Krishna prema, and he's right. And he's become lucky. Today, he's become lucky because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is there, Krishna there in the form of sadhu. But there's no other way. And this is very foreign to the way. It's a good introduction because it's very foreign. The way in which you attain prema bhakti, which he's said here without the implication, without realizing the fullness of what he's saying, is very different from the way in which the Mayavadins, Advaitins think that they will advance in spiritual life. It's a very, both in Gyan Marg, and particularly of the Advaitins and in the Yoga Marg also, these are very effort-driven practices. And it's not that bhakti is without effort, but I often say it's an effort really to get grace. So when you compare lucky to effort, that's a good way to make the contrast. He goes on, he says what? Krishna Bhakti Kar Ihai Sab Santosh. So to do Krishna Bhakti, that's no problem. That's Sab Santosh. Everyone's satisfied with that. You want to do Krishna Bhakti. Nobody takes objection to that. Of course, people said that about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in other ways, but why he has to stay up all night chanting like this? He's kind of saying there's nothing wrong with Krishna Bhakti. But I was just complaining about the way you're going about it. Now you explain yourself, but it's new to us. It's new. It was really bringing home, as I said, the point. The Namsa and Kirtan is bringing it home. Like, you couldn't do more. If this is the Guru Parampara that you follow the Guru, we're following Vyas, we're following Nara, who told Vyas to emphasize bhakti in all certain terms, and come to Chaitanya Sampradaya. This Namsa and Kirtan is really emphasizing the point with banners and horns and drums and so forth. Take it to the streets and herald the name of Krishna. Very visible and very bold, emboldened by the order of Vyas, or Nara, I should say. So anyway, nobody takes objection to Krishna Nam, but Vedanta Shumkini, Taraki Badosh. What's the fault in studying the Vedanta? Which is, okay, he's kind of going halfway here. Okay, Krishna Bhakti, that's good. What's the fault with the study of Vedanta? And of course, the fault is their way. That as if studying the Vedanta as a path or to Krishna Bhakti, or in the context of studying Vedanta, some people do Bhakti also. No problem. This is the Mayavad position, right? People, we're open to everyone. Thing, yeah. Sure, Krishna Bhakti is good. There was one, I think it was during some period at the Krishna Balaram temple where there was a festivities, maybe a commemoration of its opening or something. I wasn't there, but I heard about it. And one scholar, Advaitin, was in town and invited to speak on, Chaitanya Bhakti, and he gave a lecture, and devotees were raving about the lecture, on Krishna Bhakti. Pramod Puri Goswami, I'm not sure that's how I heard about it. But then he said, yes, and he knew this scholar, and he said, they know the philosophy better than we do. Of course, they don't accept it the way that we do. They know what we say, what we teach. That's their penchant for learning, for studying, and so forth. And so, they can, speak that way. But their idea is, of course, very different from ours. Their idea is that you do Krishna Bhakti, that's good. Even up to the point of being a Jivan Mukta, in which some Jivan Muktas in Advaita Marg who have employed bhakti, they take a relish of the lila, they come to relish the leelas in the stage of Jivan Mukta, the penultimate state, just to the last state before ultimate mukti. Well, in this body, they like the pastimes, they meditate on them, of course, then they go to the ultimate state, and then it all vanishes. Krishna Lila disappears, the form of Krishna disappears, any difference disappears. My God, what a, you've gone from material life to relishing Krishna Lila, and you're going to enter into, eternal quietude. It's very hard for us to really do that. There are other problems with the philosophy, but anyway, this is kind of a typical Mayavadan response. If a devotee is criticizing Advaita Vedanta, we have no criticism of bhakti, and we're Vedantins, you can do bhakti. But again, if they deny if it all in their estimation merges in Brahman, do Ram Bhakti, Krishna Bhakti, this, that, the other thing, and you become perfect as a Christian or whatever, you enter into Brahman. So there are many paths, and these are all for different psychologies and cultures, so it all ends up in Nirvishesha. It insidiously denies the stated goal of all the paths that differ from the ideal of Advaita Vedanta. So it's a very, it's like I say, it's insidious. We accept you all, and there's this appearance of acceptance, and they seem to feel like that also, but they don't. You realize what you're saying? You're denying in the name of accepting. Yes, it's good to be Krishna Bhakti as long as you give it up at some point. What have you understood about Krishna Bhakti? This is some kind of shadow of Krishna Bhakti. Yes. Ekta shuni hasi Prabhu bole lavachan dukkana mana hajjati koridi vedan. So Mahaprabhu replies, and he replies with a smile. Ekta shuni hasi Prabhu bole lavachan. He says, smiling, I could say a little something about Vedanta, if you like, but don't be upset. If I say something that, is a little different from the way you're thinking about it. So if you don't mind, all right, I can say something about it. I mean, I'm not a big scholar like you, but I can say something about Vedanta. And he's smiling. And what's the Gita say? What's Krishna say in the Gita? Vedanta Krit Veda Vedeta Chaya Cham. I am the compiler of the Vedanta. I am the knower of Vedanta. What he was saying. Iha shuni bole sarva sanyasiragan tumake degi viche sakshat narayan. So they're charmed by him. Hearing him say this, then they were inspired because they saw him just like Narayan. They saw him as to be God.
Tomar vachan shuni judai shravan, tomar madhuri deki, judai nayan. They said, to tell the truth, we are greatly pleased to hear your words, and furthermore, your tomar madhuri deki, judai nayan. Your bodily features are very pleasing. We feel ecstatic looking at you, seeing your person, your form. So they're like under his spell. Tomar prabhave savar ananditaman. Your prabhav, your power, your influence is making our minds full of ananda. So they're like, he has personal power behind what he's going to say. And on the basis of his personal power, he's really got them. They're converted at this point. They're ready to listen to whatever he says, because they're getting more ananda from seeing him and hearing him. And it's not even, like he says in the beginning, he had some slight, well, Krishna Bhakti's fine, but what's wrong with Vedanta? But at the same time, it's not, there's a slight question, but the way you speak is just really charming. That's the main way, whatever you would have said, it's almost like, we're like overwhelmed by that. The power of that is making our mind so blissful and all. It's a slight question, but anyway, whatever. You must be Narayan. I mean, we were getting, as I say, more bliss from just hearing the sound of your voice without even considering the meaning of it, but the words that you're saying and your personal bodily features. Then we've gotten from our study of Vedanta for a long time now. It's pretty dry comparatively. We believe, influenced as we are by your presence, our minds are full of bliss, and we believe that your words will never be unreasonable. If you can speak on Vedanta Sutra, we're ready to listen. Whatever you say, we're ready for that. Prabhu kahi Vedanta Sutra, Ishwar Vachan, Vyas Rupe Koina, Jahashi Narayana. So Mahaprabhu said, Vedanta philosophy consists of the words spoken by God in the form of Vyas. So he's identifying Krishna Dvaipayana Vyasadeva as the Shaktivesh avatar of Narayan for giving the sacred text, and that includes, of course, the sutras, which are his attempt to show what the Upanishads and so forth are saying all in one text. So Brahma Pramad Vipralipsha Karna Patava Ishwarer Bhakya Nahi Dosha Isha. So there can't be any faults in the words of God. It's basically saying. So there can't be any fault. There can't be any Brahma Pramada Vipralipsha Karna Patava. There can't be mistakes, illusions, cheating, or problems as a result of sensory insufficiency. This does not exist in the words of God. Now, this is an interesting point. Probably call these, what do you call them? The 4 defects or something like that.
4 defects, yeah.
Illusion, making mistakes, imperfect senses, and cheating propensity. And Krishna's Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was saying this does not exist in the words of God. So when we say that the sadhus, the guru, is free from these defects, then someone may ask, well, why is he wearing glasses? He obviously does not have 20/20 vision, and the eyes are senses, therefore his senses are imperfect.
He must not be a guru. Gurus don't wear glasses. Obviously. This is the implication, the commentary. So, so what's being said here is instructive, because he's saying, in the words of Narayan, as much as he's identifying Vyas with Narayan, there's no imperfection. So it means like this, that because the guru, as if we consider, as I said the other day, that sometimes said Veda Mata, Guru is the Shastra, Veda is the mother, and the Guru is the father. These two don't disagree. So they're on. So what the Guru says is supported by Shastra. So Guru does not arrive at his or her knowing by imperfect means. His or her knowing is not subject to these imperfections, because he or she draws from the Shastra and faithfully repeats that, and of course approaches the Shastra properly to get realization, and then speak about it, of course, in an insightful way as well. So it's not just a repetition of what's there. You can't just memorize the book and repeat it, and that's what it constitutes to be a guru, of course. But that she doesn't make it up as they go along. And Prabhupada was very strong on this point. It's a really, really good point, because many people are making it up as they go along, and you have to ask them, can you write a book about that? Or we can just like see it on paper and show, or you contradict yourself and underline it. And I remember when I was young and I used to distribute Prabhupada's books, and we would talk to people, and you get in. I like to get in discussions with them, of philosophy, and as much as the time allowed, and you found that kind of a person. And then so many times I'd be discussing, and people would contradict themselves. They'd say something, or you defeat them on a point, and then they'd ignore the fact that you defeat them and just go on and on and on. And then sometimes they come back to the same point that you already defeated them on. It's like very, very frustrating. And then they don't, want to acknowledge it in the discussion and so forth. Their memory is, conveniently, didn't really said that, and that already defeated it and accepted it, or whatever. So anyway, the point is, if you wrote it down, then you have them. That's what you corner. So I really appreciate the fact that Prabhupada wrote it down. And he also basically, in telling us that, he said, so if there's a contradiction, you can see it. So sometimes you might find a contradiction in Prabhupada's book. It's rare, but you can find some, and you have to resolve them. This is what he taught us. An example that comes up with what we're talking about, I suppose, as we see what's the purpose of Advaita Vedanta given by Shankar. What's the purpose of that? We'll get to that. But anyway, the overall point is, it's an important one, that the Guru is perfect in this regard, because he doesn't rely on imperfect means of knowing. He relies on Shrota Pantha, the descending path of knowledge. Faithfully represents it. To be credible, as Prabhupada used to teach us, in spiritual circles, one has to be able to cite the sacred text, or what was at the time the standard of knowledge, and within our own circles, with regard to the kind of knowledge that we're interested in, extraordinary knowledge, spiritual knowledge, it remains so. Prabhupada said, my books will be the law books for 10,000 years. What does it mean? We're going to decide whether stoplights should be red to green or yellow, or, there's laws like that, right? So what laws are they going to cover? Obviously they deal with a certain type of knowledge that is not dealt with elsewhere, or attempts to deal with it elsewhere. That means knowledge of, say, the nature of consciousness, and so forth. Our faith is that requires knowledge coming from up to down, that revelation, that So it's a special knowledge about God. It's a special kind of knowledge. And other traditions we have their sacred texts. They more or less agree on. I would say the Bible, for example, the Quran is the thing. It's descending. There are things that are beyond the ken of the human, biological, psychological species. That's a reasonable, very, very reasonable argument. I mean, we know that to be true we know that to be true. We know that we can't hear certain sounds. Of course, we know that we can't, so we found that out. It makes us think we can know quite a bit. We can know everything, perhaps, just by the exercise of our brains. But the position here is that that's not the case. And that's a reasonable position to take. So it's a special kind of knowledge. So these kind of books, these spiritual books, they remain pertinent, valuable, useful, meaningful for why 10,000? 10,001, 2, and more forever. It's just hyperbole. It's a way of saying these books, this will always be a standard of knowledge about the subjects that they deal with. And as I said before, also, I don't think there's anywhere, I'm sure, but there's nowhere outside of its own discipline that modern science has turned over the decades, recent decades, where consciousness has been entertained as an interesting and elusive topic. Nowhere they've turned outside of themselves more, if anywhere, than to the East, to the Orient, to Hinduism, and to Buddhism. And Buddhism is really just an outgrowth of Hinduism from the Upanishadic side of Hinduism, Vedanta side. They've looked there where consciousness has been the subject from the dawn of, the cradle of civilization, if you will. It's new to us, a topic of interest. It's always been the subject there. They talk about it, of course, in ways that are different than we talk about knowing things. Because again, we don't think that it's a thing, so there have to be different ways to talk about it. And to know it, a very different method and so forth. We're very preoccupied, we're very accustomed to knowing in a certain way and going about knowing. And these ways are foreign. They're very foreign. They're very much opposite in a sense, going within aparoksha as opposed to pratyaksha, knowing with the senses and instruments created by the senses and reasoning. Aparoksha is like, what's that? How can you know? By closing down the mind. How can you know? By restraining the senses. It's by the senses that we know. We touch fire, we know it's hot. So this is the animal way of knowing. And then if you add to that some reasoning about what you touch, this is the human way of knowing. But what about the spiritual way of knowing? That which is beyond the animal, beyond the human, which is you, that takes different animal dress, human dress, and so forth, as may be the case, as a different way of knowing, different way of talking about it, and so forth. So these will be books for that subject. That won't change. These kinds of books, and so they have their the realm where they're authoritative. We can say they have all knowledge, because knowing that, then nothing remains to be known. Having $100, you have 10. All the relative knowledge is seen to be such in relation to knowledge of the self and Godhead and experience and so forth. So they're perfect in that way. So we in this realm, then recite them. There may be different ways to think about different texts and so on and so forth, which lends to different disciplines, which lends to different experiences of the absolute. There's latitude there and so on. But
in an overarching sense, then this descending method of knowing is not subject to the defects that ordinary ways of knowing in human society are subject to. Our ordinary ways of knowing are subject to the defects of our bias, our prejudice, I guess you call it, the cheating propensity, our imperfect senses, so on and so forth. This is the point. The descending method is not subject to that, but you have to receive it with your senses imperfect. Yes, that's true. That's true. But if you do it in the way which is described, then the senses become purified. Also, the spiritualizing of the sadhaka deha. Putting bhakti. This is sadhana bhakti. What does sadhana bhakti mean? It means you put the swarup shakti on your senses. That's what it means. So you're using the senses now, ideally only in relation to sense objects for the pleasure of Krishna. That's what it means to perfect them. Then they become means of knowing the self comprehensively. Private, comprehensive knowing. So Upanishad Sahita Sutra Kohe Je Tattva Mukyo Vrityai Se Artha Paramahatma. The absolute truth is described in the Upanishads and Brahma Sutras. But Mahaprabhu says, one must understand them as they are. That is the supreme Artha Parama Mahatma, the supreme way of knowing. Sounds like a very literal, but he's making a point of what? That Mukhya Vritti, as opposed to Gona Vritti. So he's saying principally, he takes the next verse, Gona Vritti Jeva Bhashya Koriga Acharya Tahar Shravaninash Hoi Sarva Karja. Shankaracharya, by contrast, whom you're following, he's saying, has described the Veda, the Upanishads, in terms of Gona Vritti. Hearing such explanations, then the meaning is lost. So these are two ways of interpreting. So if I say to you, my house is on the Ganges, just down there. Where do you live? I live on the Ganga, about 2 miles down. I live on the, where's your ashram? It's on the French Broad River. Okay, so if I say that, you have to interpret that by Gona Vritti, because the Mukhya Vritti means direct. It means my house is on the river. How do you put a house on the river? Is it a houseboat? Is your ashram a houseboat? You're on the river? You have to say what he means. It's on the river bank. It's a manner of speech. So there are statements that have to be interpreted like that in the Shastra. And there are the Mukhya Vritti statements that are taken as they are. There's no need to give them a Gona Vritti interpretation. So what Mahaprabhu was saying to Prakashananda is that you've taken, Shankar takes thousands and thousands of statements from the scripture that says God's form is eternal, he has transcendental qualities, his name is transcendental, all these things. The qualities, the leelas, guna, the leela, the nam, the rupa of God, you interpret them all by Gona Vritti. They should all be, there's no need to do that. They should all be interpreted as taken as they are. And then there are some instances where you have to take it differently. But that's always going to be the lesser, just like in our English language. I mean, most things you take on their face. Some things you have to interpret them according to Gona Vritti.
right? So he says Shankar's interpretation is done just the opposite. And this is the problem. This has something to do, this opinion here, as Prabhupada envisioning himself in a sense as a Vedantist, with a mission, Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatadesha. He attached his subtitle to the Bhagavad Gita as it is. The Bhagavad Gita Mukhivriti. In his classical example is when Krishna says, surrender unto me, it doesn't mean it's not to be taken in terms of vulnerability and surrender to the Krishna who you are within, to yourself who's Krishna within is the real meaning. This is like, what? Okay, as it is. And somebody say, well, why take it literally? Why don't we interpret Krishna away? After all, what's the reason for that? Well, because you don't like God, or you don't believe that God can do the wonderful things that Krishna is said to do. I mean, whether he did them or not, or in what detail, does it matter? By all the mahima of Krishna, we're saying God is extraordinary. God is not limited in the ways that you are. You're a tiny jiva. God is the source of jivas. You're the spark. God's the fire. There's a huge difference. You have to get that. That's one of the reasons why the stories about Krishna are so fantastic, to make the point. And you can see there's a need for it. The Secret Mayavadis think they're God, right? The Advaitins, they think that the Jiva is Brahman. Wait a minute here. And then for Prabhupada to make these simple statements like, so he can produce one gold coin, some mystic. He can produce a coin. Why doesn't he produce a whole mountain of gold and solve all the economic problems in the world? You can't do that. So this, in one sense, all the stories of Krishna, of course, once Prabhupada was asked a reader what he thought of the Krishna book. He said, I thought it was a bit fantastic. And Prabhupada's reply was, well, I think you're a bit fantastic. The implication being to think that the things that God are said to do are impossible. You want to make him fit between your ears and your sense of what's possible. The whole point of the narratives of his extraordinariness, in one sense, are to say there's a difference. Otherwise, we don't want a difference. We want him to be one of us, and ourselves to be one of the Brajvasis. So ultimately, they don't think all those fantastic things exist. So we agree with you. That's a bit fantastic to think that Krishna could do all those things, But that comes when you love him. Like Mother Yashoda doesn't believe the stories of the cowherd boys. Back in the boys themselves think that Krishna had something to do with it. We were there too. We were helping him out. We were energizing him. Whatever. We were helping him to lift the boat on hills. So the main point is not the Aishvarya and all, and you can tell him the tales as tall as you want to tell him to make the point. Krishna is different than us. When you get that point and then approach, then you can see he's one of us. He's one of us. He's a Brajvasi. When you become a Brajvasi, it's the sweetness that we're interested in, not the Aishvarya. We're not interested in how long Putana was. 12 miles. You can forget that part. If you want, it's just making. That's where I say that Vyasa walks a tightrope in the Bhagavatam between Aishvarya and Madhurya. He has to show them Aishvarya in order that he can bring out the Madhurya. Because if Krishna's not God, then it's not sweet, right? That he's human-like. So there's ways of speaking about his Aishvarya. The point being to bring out his Madhurya. So we rest with this point here again, that being that the basic problem that Mahaprabhu begins with the way you look at the Vedanta through the lens of Shankar's teaching, is that you make the Gunavritti the main interpretation of everything, and the Mukhavritti to be secondary. That's backwards. Any question?
Is that how Sarvabhauma was explaining things?
Yes. Yes. From the Advaita perspective, which Mahaprabhu described as the sutras are like the sun, and you've covered them with a cloud of your imagination. I mean, Krishnadas is very, very not happy with the Mayavad. He'll later say, Mayavad philosophy, basically Shankar said, Vyasa is crazy. He doesn't really get it. Let me tell you, what he wanted to say that he didn't know how to say. He feels that Shankar's position is very insulting in that way. Now there's a place for Shankar. We have to get to that and all. We glorify him. So that's part of, the preaching strategy that I was alluding to before when I said, well, sometimes there may be contradictions in Prabhupada's books. We have to look at them and see why he said it, where, but there's precedence for such. People say things and they have meaning for a certain time, and later on they have to be shown as such. You can't just hang on to them because they're not working in the time. There's been a progression of, for example, theism, let's say, in terms of Vedanta in India. Follow it and see why Shankar, why Buddha were speaking the way they were at the time. I'm sorry, yes.
And it is for that reason that the Vaishnavas, they're content with the Bhagavatam as a mature commentary, and when the fact that they say in order to start a lineage you need a commentary on the Vedanta Sutra, that's mostly coming from the Mayavad sect. It's not there in the Vaishnava sect so much.
Well, the Vaishnava sects of Ramanuja and Madhva, at least they follow after Shankar. Shankar made his commentary, and in his commentary he said these are the 10 principal Upanishads. And so because he did that and then drew his commentary from that, explained the sutras and with that consideration, then they went in and used his same methodology or references, and in the same way he went about to show a different interpretation. So Ramanuja particularly was at Madhva, they were dealing with Shankar's Bhashya, and so they followed his way of commentary and accepted, okay, if these are the main things, then we'll consider those the main things. Now I am not so sure about the dating of the Nimbarka, or the Vishnu Swami commentaries on the Vedanta. I don't know I've got a copy of Nimbarka's commentary in his school on Vedanta Sutra. I haven't seen one of the Vishnu Swami. There's Vallabha, of course, in later times, Mahaprabhu's times, but I'm not sure in the same way I've referenced Nimbarka's commentary, but I haven't studied it, I think it's after Shankar also. Now that I think about it, I think he looks at what Shankar says, he looks at Ramanuja and quotes it sometimes, and so forth. So maybe there were commentaries before Shankar as well, but I don't know, somehow his became prominent. And then it's arguable that, well, if it's become prominent in that way and then you want to argue against it, then you have to follow the same way and come up with your own explanation of the sutras. But I mean, Gaudiyas are doing the same thing, but they're just saying that there is an explanation of the sutras. We have it, it's right here. It's the Bhagavatam, and as Guru Purana says, and so we have a commentary. Of course, then we have the Govinda Bhashya as well. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, the necessity, if I gather from what you say correctly, the necessity is coming from the fact that taking the Vedanta Sutra and explaining it in a way that it's not actually in their own way, their own interpretation, is only necessary because it was misinterpreted by those that were putting forth the Mayavad philosophy.
Well, yeah, but not entirely, because if you want to articulate, you have to come up with some books, right? You have an idea of what is the nature of the jiva, what the nature of God, Brahman, Maya, and so forth, according to what the scriptures are saying, and you're going to have to explain it. And the sutras kind of seek to do that, but they do it in a coded way, and so to uncode the sutras.
Necessary, no matter what the tradition.
I think so, yeah. In the tradition of Vedanta, Vedanta means in the end of the end of the Veda, the Upanishadic section, and the sutras are thought to be Vyasa's attempt to explain this in shorthand, really shorthand, the Upanishads. So if that's the standard of knowledge, and you've got a sect, and it's got to be supported by the Upanishads. Yeah. All right, who's up there? Shri Chaitanya Charitamrita ki jai, Jai Mahaprabhu ki jai, Shri Gaur Radha Madhava ki jai, Shri Vaishnava Pankara ki jai, Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Gaur Prem.
Tripurari Swami Maharaj, Gurudev ki jai.